What's up, guys, and welcome to the show. This is Tyler's Talking RC, coming at you with episode 3. I'm Tyler C, here with
Tyler P.
Tyler P. Today we are talking tools. Tools needed, tools nice to have, a little bit of maintenance tips at the end. So let's get right into it. Tools are a very big part of the RC hobby. Definitely going to need some nice to have, some required. One of the main tools that we're going to get right into in the beginning is Allen wrenches. Allen drivers, very important tool. So I've broken it down into about 4 main levels of tools. The first of which being level 1, which I classify as the ready to run tools. This is basically your L-shaped Allen wrench and your little mini nut driver that they usually give you.
Which there's nothing wrong with.
Which we had a debate about, and Tyler P. still uses that one on a regular basis, which is fine. But there are definitely better options in the nut driver market, which we will get into next. But we're going to talk about Allen drivers first.
Yeah.
So your basic Allen driver, not the best quality. Most companies throw them in with a car, so I don't know what that tells you right there.
If it's free, it can't be great.
They're more or less giving them away.
Yeah, so does IKEA. You know?
So I'd give them away as well. They're pretty terrible quality, meaning they will most likely round off or strip out or just generally wear out, break. They get the job done once or twice. They can save you in a pinch if you need something quick. But you'll probably quickly outlive them if you stick with the hobby for more than a week.
Yeah, agreed. That's usually the first thing that you get fed up with dealing with.
Yeah.
The
little nut driver not so bad, but the Allen wrenches are terrible.
Yeah, and they chew up your hands, and it's
kill your fingers.
It's just kind of miserable.
Yeah, especially if you got to build like a newer car and you're using the ones that came with the kit.
I can't imagine trying to do that. That's
terrible because the plastic's not even threaded yet, and you're trying to start it with your hand. Yeah, I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah, or sit there doing this, trying to get it to spin.
Oh yeah, the little.
Yeah.
So that's level 1 Allen wrench tools. They'll get you out of a pinch. They will technically do the job, but you're not gonna like yourself after.
Yep.
Basically. So moving on to what I consider to be level 2 in Allen wrenches is essentially the same quality tip, but put into some kind of handle. They're made like they got like a straight rod, and they're put into some handle. But the tip of it is essentially the same quality.
Yep.
As an L-shaped wrench, or sometimes they got like a T handle, something that you might grab at like Harbor Freight or just a really low-end RC tool kit. They do have a marketed, your $20 to $30 tool kit.
Yeah, and what you'll find with those too is because they've taken the basic Allen wrench and they put a handle on it. Now it's really bulky. It's a pain in the butt to put in your toolkit, and like Tyler said, the quality of the metal is still kind of poor. Those are the ones that if you're really trying to do maybe a pinion screw or something like a grub screw, you'll watch as it spirals. The shaft will actually twist as you're kind of putting some torque on it, and that's not great.
Anything that's Loctited in there or something like that, and if it's not twisting, it's stripping it out.
Right.
The tolerances on those tools are definitely not very tight. So if you're using even some of the screws tolerances are not the best. So if you have a screw that's not very good tolerance, being a little bit bigger of a socket, and your tool is not the best tolerance, it's a little bit small, nothing's gonna happen. You're just gonna strip it right out, and you're gonna get frustrated. I see it constantly up at the counter. I can't get this screw out. Well, what tool are you using? Well, I got the little Allen wrench came with it. Well, there you go.
Right.
They get you out of a pinch, not the best. So that's level 2. I mean, it's better than the L wrench because now you got a handle. You're not gonna wear yourself out quite as fast, but the tip quality is still not the best.
Right.
So which brings me to level 3, which I consider to be a fairly good tool. Definitely get you by it, and then that's mostly like we got like these. What was that? We got like these Intigi tools. This is just your basic one here, if you guys can see that. We are all visual on YouTube here, by the way. If anybody is listening, check us out on the YouTube. So this is an Intigi tool set, which has been around for quite a while.
I've had those probably 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, these are Tyler's personal tools. They're pretty good. These are mid-grade. The tips usually, I think these are, titanium nitride coated. I think
Yeah,
that's what they
the
call
gold
that.
is.
Yeah, the gold. It's just a hardened tip or coating, I suppose.
Yep.
So it's a decent metal underneath. They do tend to round out a little quicker over time.
The nice things with when you get up to like what Tyler's calling a level 3, it's a little bit hard to see, but there is a set screw, and you can actually replace the tips.
Right.
So
replaceable tips. That's another thing.
At least you're not throwing out the handle if you strip the end of it, and they definitely have a better survival rate than the lower end stuff. They're not super premium.
No, but they're definitely a lot better than, I'd say, the 1 and the 2 levels.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And the level system is 100% made up by me, by the way. That's just what we're talking about. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So yeah, the level 3 tools definitely will work for the majority of people if you're just doing your regular random repairs here in your 1 or 2 cars and this and that. Definitely no problem with those. That's probably the toolkit range in the $30 to $60 range. It really depends on how many tools come in said kit. I think this Intigi one, they have them ranging from like 50 to 100, I think, if I remember right.
Yeah, depending on whether it's just the hex or whether it comes with nut drivers, all the other stuff.
And Traxxas, Dynamite, Intigi, there's probably a couple I'm missing. They all have their own toolkits, and they're all kind of considered in that group, is my opinion.
Yeah.
Traxxas does have a fairly high-end one, which I'll consider in Group 4, which we can talk about now. Level 4 is primarily the tools that I use. If you're doing a lot of regular maintenance and you're really into the hobby, invest in good tools. And even if you're just buying tools for the first time, it just pays to invest in good tools, in my opinion.
Right.
And the number one brand that usually comes to mind is usually MIP. And we also have our kit, which I've been using. This is the RCM toolkit, which has a couple tools in it I want to show as well. These tips are hardened steel or made of a tool steel. They don't round out very easy. They're very strong. You can get a lot of mileage out of them.
Yeah, and I'll say, so these Intiges are mine, and these first 2 MIPs are mine.
Yeah.
So I've handled both. The Intiges have much less of that twist that I described. The T handles will have.
Right.
The MIPs have almost none. They're a very hard metal. They're very firm.
Yeah.
So whatever torque you're putting into the handle is going into the fastener, and it has a very positive feel, very good feedback to it.
Yeah, they're essentially. I believe they make them out of tool blanks or drill blanks or something like that, as far as I was told. I feel like I'm on QVC. Check that out. Wow. And then talking also about the tools in that group with the hardened tips and this and that, we have our setup here, which also brings in another. It's in a nice little case here.
I didn't even know you guys had that. He
Yeah.
showed it to me like 5 minutes before we started filming. It's really nice looking.
So when you move into this category, I want to bring up the 1/4-inch drive. A lot of these tools have a 1/4-inch option. So when I say that, that's actually the drive on the back of the tool is a 1/4-inch across, which is a pretty standard measurement across the tools, unrelated to RC, really. Essentially, if you're watching here, they fit into, like, this is a handle, and the kit comes with a bunch of tool bits you can swap in and out, and it'll work across the line with any of these tools. This is an MIP handle, or our handle with an MIP tool, and they'll also work in if you got a drill. So if you're moving into working on your car a lot, you're probably going to want to pick up some kind of drill, which we'll get into in the next category. But 1/4-inch drive tools is something to consider, like our kit coming with the handle and the 1/4-inch drive. So if you do pick up a drill later on, you don't have to get new tools.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But MIP also selling 1/4-inch drives, but it is a separate tool kit. They do not sell the handle ones and the tool ones together, but awesome quality tools. I use MIPs every day.
Yeah. Right, because the amber colored tools they're permanent. You can't replace the tips on those.
Yeah, if you break the tip on an MIP tool, well, it's pretty difficult to do, but it does happen. You cannot replace the tip. You have to buy a whole nother tool.
Right.
They are set into the handles. Whereas the Integy ones, like Tyler had mentioned before, has a set screw. You can take it in and out, replace the tip, which is nice. And then our setup is a 1/4 inch drive. Well, if you do break it on the 1/4 inch drive, you got to buy a new tip. But your handle is still good. You don't have to replace the handle. But moving on from the Allens, that's pretty much the 4 levels of Allen wrenches there. We're going to talk a little bit about the nut drivers, which while still do have different qualities, not nearly as important as Allen drivers as far as quality goes, in my opinion.
Yeah, fair.
I hardly ever strip out a nut driver.
I never have.
Yeah, if I am, it's usually the nut that strips out, not so much the tool.
Yeah.
So we did talk about Tyler and his little nut driver here. They usually come with everything. Solid tool. It's got 4 different sizes on there, so it does have a good purpose. But it is just made of a cast metal, so it is. I do see it is wearing out a little bit in there.
Yep.
So they're not the best quality, but like I said, quality's not as big of a deal for nut drivers. But it's still, there are still different levels. So that's his one there, and then I got MIP also makes nut drivers, which again are machined out of pretty high quality steel, and I've been using this one for like 2 years now, and basically shows no signs of wear.
Right.
It's essentially,
and having it like a proper handle on it, having the ergonomic advantage is good because this can be a pain in the butt. You know, like most cars now have 10 skill, carpet cars. They have serrated wheel nuts. So there are times when I'm having to twist this thing pretty hard to get, a wheel nut off because I over tightened it on the way in or whatever. If you have the grip, it's easier to get your, the torque, the mechanical advantage. And if you're trying to do something that's fine, where you're trying to finesse it, it gives you a little bit more of a feel, than this, which is like a clock wrench.
Yeah. But again, like the quality of the tips is not as big of a deal for nut drivers. But I usually just say get a matching set for your Allen drivers because it looks nice. If you pick up the MIPs, you might as well get the matching MIP nut drivers and have a complete set.
Well, so now I can't unsee that. My stuff doesn't match.
Right, you're going to need to get that MIP tool.
I probably do.
That being said,
darn it.
The nut drivers also do come in the 1/4 inch drive as well. We got that in our kit there, so you can take wheels and tires and stuff off quickly in your drill and with the handle. So we got nut drivers, Allen drivers, and the quality on them. Invest in good tools and you won't regret it. It's basically the moral story on that one, and across any of the tools that we talk about. So beyond Allen drivers, it doesn't hurt to have some Phillips drivers and flathead screwdrivers. While not nearly as popular in hobby grade trucks, being the mechanic here, I do have to use one relatively often. I just use a few today. For those, I actually personally just go to Harbor Freight and pick up these screwdriver sets that they have there.
Yeah.
While they're not really the best quality, I don't use them often enough to really spend a lot of money on Phillips screwdrivers.
Right. Whereas the Allen drivers, you're using them all the time.
That's just a regular. You can buy. I think they got like a 12 or 13 pack for like $11.
Yeah.
And generally, when I'm using a flathead, it's to pry out something or I'm bending something, if it breaks, I just throw it away and I get another one.
Right.
There's really no flathead screws. I'm usually picking at something or prying at something, picking a speed control off with tape. But they definitely have their place and they come in handy.
So the small caveat there, since I'm the vintage guy, is if you're doing something with an old Kyosho or an old Tamiya, or even the re-releases are still coming with the JIS standard, which is a Japanese Phillips head.
Yep.
And there are dedicated tool sets for that. Tamiya sells a little toolkit that has all the right screw.
And their screwdriver is pretty nice, for the record.
Yeah, it's a nice looking kit. I don't have that. Maybe now I need to go get it. But that's kind of like the only instance I can think of where you're really going to use Phillips head stuff is if you're doing some of the old stuff.
For sure, if you're into the vintage cars, definitely Phillips. But even it just doesn't hurt to have. Honestly, like I have a large size one and then just a small one. Because some of these smaller cars use really tiny Phillips and also little tiny helicopters, I've noticed sometimes.
Oh, really?
But that's going to be more of a situational thing but it definitely doesn't hurt just to have one even around your house, really.
Yeah, if you're an adult, you should.
Yeah, you should probably just have a screwdriver in your life just to begin with. But that's beside the point. So that's screwdrivers and flatheads, cheap Harbor Freight kit, and honestly, Harbor Freight's good for a few things here and there that you're plan on just breaking and not using properly. That's
Yeah.
usually what I go there for.
Go there if you need to use it once.
Correct. Yeah, and they're pretty cheap. So beyond those tools, I think that you need a good pair of pliers and some kind of picks.
Yeah.
For cleaning and stuff like that. This is my Leatherman here, which is a killer pair of pliers and also a knife and a whole bunch of other fun things. But these have been really nice. Pretty expensive for just a pair of pliers. I think these are $100-something bucks. But again, Harbor Freight does sell plier kits that I have also in my toolbox, large and small.
Yeah.
They work quite well. A little pair of vice grips here and there. Just any kind of plier. Sometimes you're gonna have to pull things out. Pins and body clips get stuck and bent, and just in general.
Well, and you can get, the standard issue vice grip. You can get them with, like a longer nose or whatever, and they actually come. You can get them pretty small.
Yeah.
So they're kind of RC car sized, appropriate.
Yeah, they sell a whole kit, and then it's just I should get sponsored by Harbor Freight. I mean, I'm not paid by Harbor Freight. Anybody that's listening, I'm not paid, but if they are listening,
If they'd like to.
yeah, hit me up. I'll take a Harbor Freight sponsorship. Anyway,
I'm sure whoever owns Harbor Freight is tuning in for sure.
I hope so. They should. I'm promoting them. But anyway, yeah, pliers are good to have, and then he kind of like little picks. I actually I have an old Allen wrench that I sharpened into a tip, and I use it to
Self defense.
not well. It hasn't come to that yet. But no, if you do a lot of off road racing, a lot of the dirt gets packed in the bottom of those screws.
Yes.
And I use that to dig out a lot of dirt, and just working on a lot of people's general bashing. There's just always dirt packed in
Yeah.
screws. So having some kind of metal pick to dig dirt out.
Or to get out O-rings or, whatever else that you're
Right.
trying to, delicate stuff.
Right. Just having some kind of pick. And I just happen to use a broken tool that I sharpened, but it works fine. Lifesaver. Always have it on my bench. Use it almost every day, just picking out dirt and stupid things like that.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
So basic hand tools, Allen wrenches, screwdrivers, pliers, and then we're going to talk a little bit, and we're still in the first category here of just things that you kind of need. Glue, grease, Loctite. Yes, this is the grease that I use. This is actually marine grease, but a little pumper that's made by I think Dynamite, right?
Yep, Dynamite brand.
Dynamite marine grease. So it doesn't have to be that grease. There's really a lot of different kinds of grease. Usually we probably talk about grease for 10 minutes, but we're not going to do that. Depending on what you're using the grease for, you may want a different type. That's marine grease, so any kind of metal on metal gear action, I use that one. Differentials, transmissions, CVD joints, all that kind of stuff. That's what I use. And that was Metal Gear transmissions, not so much in plastic, but sometimes plastic.
Yeah, if you fill a carpet car
Yeah.
full of that stuff, it's not good.
It's mostly pertaining to rock crawlers and bashing vehicles where resistance is not so much a problem as lubrication is.
Right.
But racing cars, that's a whole different game. There's all kinds of greases for that. But just some kind of basic grease, some high pressure grease, you can really get it anywhere. I like the marine grease because it's a little stickier and really sticks to the gears quite well. And if you're playing with your car in water, it's a lot more water resistance just because it's made for boats. Not that grease is water soluble anyway, but this sticks really well. So and it comes with a little pumper too, which is nice. You don't get to get crap all over your fingers. Pump it right in.
And you guys have that stuff here.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Definitely saw that.
Right.
So after that, Loctite and glue. Boom, boom. They go hand in hand. The glue, any kind of plastic to plastic that you want to get stuck together, use the glue. Wheels, tires, anything like that. I know any getting ready to run cars, wheels are popping off. Have some glue on hand. Glue the wheels back onto the rims. Anything really.
It can also be, if you're really careful with how you do it, one of the old like oval racer tricks was to, if you have like a pinhole through like an arm or something that was slopped out, you could put a drop of super glue in it and then basically blow through the hole, and you leave like this thin so you can use it basically to rebush arms and things like that.
Yeah.
If you're not, trying to spend a ton of money and
Take out
replace
some of the
parts all
play.
the time.
Careful doing that. You don't want to glue your arm onto the car.
Well, yeah, you got to do it off.
Expert level technique. Ask Tyler Pete more about
And
that on
you
the side.
probably need a reamer to chase it afterwards too.
Arm reamer. That's a high level tool.
Yeah.
But anyway, super glue, many functions. Definitely just try to have some great around the house as well too. I use it for random things here and there.
Yep, gluing your fingers together.
And basically in the same playing field as glue, Loctite. But Loctite is only metal to metal objects. Do not use Loctite on plastic. I get asked that on a daily basis. Loctite does not work on plastic. It tends to eat it a little bit and will just make things worse. But anytime you have a screw going into metal and you don't want it to rattle out, Loctite.
Right. So for like a 8th scale nitro buggy, anything that's going to see like the
Kind of vibrating or motion of some kind.
yeah, camber link pivots and things like that get a lot of monkey motion over the course of a run. It's also worth noting that there are basically two distinct flavors of Loctite. There's the blue, which is your multi-purpose. You can take it apart without hating your life, and then there's the red, and the red is pretty close to this is permanent.
Correct.
So on an RC car where you've got a bunch of tiny screws that can't take a lot of load, blue is more than what you need. Make sure that the holes are clean. A little dab will do you, and just give it enough time to cure, which it usually says on the bottle. Whether
I said a little dab because if you do coat it in blue Loctite, it's gonna be a pain to get back out to.
Yeah.
Don't let it soak overnight in Loctite and then ram it in because it's gonna be a pain to get back. Just a little bit on the threads.
Yep.
And put it in a little bit. You don't need a lot. If you put a little bit on and it proceeds to come out, put a little bit more. And if you're really having a problem, that's when you switch to the red. Or if you're working on much larger vehicles like the 5th scales and stuff like that, that's kind of when I switch to red.
Right, that makes sense.
But you really got to be careful with that red because it's locked in. It's Loctite.
Usually to undo the red, it requires heat.
Correct.
So if you don't want to break out the big red wrench.
Yeah, or the Dremel and cutting holes and it's the whole show. But Loctite, great to have. Definitely always around my bench, for sure. So that's pretty much qualifies the tools needed, or level 1 tools, I'll say. Allen wrenches, grease, screwdrivers, pliers, just good things to have in general. We can probably actually fit cleaning tools into that one too, some basic cleaning tools.
Yeah.
We'll throw cleaning tools into this category too. Tyler P holding up a toothbrush. Shout out to Tom, throwing me the last minute text there. Need a toothbrush. And he's right. Toothbrush definitely get in a lot of places there, cleaning stuff. We just got a regular small paintbrush here too. Obviously you can get bigger ones or smaller ones on that. Air compressor is a really great one for this too.
Yep.
Not really an entry level tool. Obviously harder for some people to obtain. They are quite noisy and can't be used everywhere.
Right.
But if you can get one, definitely an awesome tool to have. But I wouldn't qualify it as a beginner tool.
Right.
But any brushes or I use a wire brush often too. Paintbrush, toothbrush, some kind of cleaning spray like Simple Green or electrical cleaner is great to have.
Motor cleaner.
Yep.
I actually am going to be doing a video on isopropyl alcohol. That's another relatively, especially on metals, very harmless, very easy to come by. You can get it at like a CVS, Rite Aid, whatever.
Yeah, pretty much anywhere.
It's dirt cheap and it cuts grease, oils, all stuff like that. So and you can have a little tub.
Yeah, basically any light duty degreaser.
Yep.
Really.
And just make sure you get it cleaned and rinsed off.
Yeah, basic cleaning supplies, which we'll touch a little bit more on when I get into the maintenance, but I just wanted to throw it in that category while we were still there. So that's just level 1 tools. Now moving along with the level system that I have devised just before this video. Level 2. Level 2 tools are tools that aren't really needed, but are definitely nice to have. My first one I got on here, my spark notes on the side here, which we talked about a little bit before, is a drill. This one right here is my drill. Thank you, sir. This is a DeWalt drill, but a lot of companies make them. This is one I've had very good luck with for many years now. I don't know which one it is. It's a DCF 610 for anybody that's interested. DeWalt. This one takes the 1/4-inch drives like we had talked about before up front there. But a lot of the major companies sell drills. DeWalt, Milwaukee, Craftsman, Ryobi, all of them really. It's like I said, it's a standard tool size for not just RC. But you're probably going to want to get one with some kind of clutch on it. That basically just sets I don't know, there's different levels of resistance where the drill will actually just start slipping. So you don't strip out the plastic or the screw or something like that. So if you're a beginner to the drill game, pick one up with a clutch. Save yourself a little trouble. This one's also got a nice light on the front of it. I don't know if you guys can see that. Yeah, pretty cool. The light is cool. So definitely a drill game changer if you're building kits or have to work on a cars a lot.
Which is your life.
Yes,
100%.
I actually have 3 drills on my bench.
Yeah.
This is actually the smaller one, but I've had this one the longest.
I went for a long time without having, I'll say like a drill for fasteners and stuff like that. I had like a Makita I kept in the basement for if I had to,
Right.
drill a hole or something like that. But I finally broke down and I got one. It's one of those basic, Amazon, eBay, China, 90-degree
Yeah.
nut drivers. And it's actually pretty nice. Like
Yeah.
it makes life a lot easier if you're taking a shock tower off, right? Where it's 4 screws that are in, half an inch deep each.
20mm long screw.
Instead of sitting there forever, you can
Oh,
basically
yeah.
just plug it in and push the button and just, be bored for a few seconds and it comes out.
Yeah.
And they're not that expensive either.
Yeah, 2 things to build off of what you just said. Don't buy too big of a drill. Like you said, I have a bunch of DeWalt tools in my house that not pertain to RC, but they sell massive drills. Don't use your 20-volt drill that's the biggest impact that they
150 foot-pounds
Yeah,
for doing
and-
lug nuts on a car.
One, it's super heavy, and this is like mostly finesse work, and trying to line something up with a massive drill is kind of a pain. And 2, they can get away from you fast. They will strip out a screw faster than you can let go of the trigger.
Yep.
I use one occasionally, and it's caught me a few times, even with my experience, and it just boop, stripped it right out. And these drills spin much slower, so you get a lot more control over them. They're made for the small work. This is a 12-volt drill. I have never needed more power than a 12-volt drill, and I've worked on quarter-scale RC cars. You don't need to use this massive drill, and if you are using one, just be super careful.
Right.
And then circling back, you were talking about drilling and putting in long screws. Building kits with a drill is much easier because most of the screws going into plastic are not threaded, so they're super hard.
You're cutting the threads the first time you engage them.
The drill will cut the threads for you.
My only precaution would be, if you're doing that, you probably want to be mindful of your speed.
Well, that's what comes down to using
And
a smaller drill.
You probably want to start the fastener by hand.
See, I usually just finish it by hand.
Well, I was going to say and finish it by hand.
See, you're double. I started. If it's going into plastic, I start it by hand. Or excuse me, I start it with the drill into plastic.
Okay.
In the metal, I always go by hand into metal because I don't want to cross thread anything. Very fine threads. Always start it in the metal. But I usually just end up finishing it in plastic just so I get the right feel.
Yeah, you definitely
tension
need to
on
finish it that way. You ever put a drop of grease on the screw before you put it in?
Yes, I have done that. It does
Yeah.
work. It does work well.
In plastic, right?
Plastic,
or metal
yeah.
too, probably, I guess.
Yeah, I've
Just to-
done it before. Yeah.
Just to make them run nicer.
Yep, I've
Yeah.
done it. Unknown driver pro tip, a little bit of grease. I've seen people use chapstick. Before
Hashtag
too.
OCD.
Seen people use chapstick before too.
Somebody mentioned, I read something today where someone said that. I got to try that.
Yep, it does work. I've done it. I don't usually have chapstick on me, so that was short lived. But
Probably less messy.
yeah, it definitely. You can just twirl it in there. But we're getting off on a tangent there. Anyway, pro tip: drills, very useful. Pick one up. If you're intending on staying in the hobby for a decent period of time, it'll be worth its weight in gold. I basically won't work on anything without my drill at this point.
Yeah. And in fairness, a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, I know what drives my purchases, is if I feel the need, like, "Ah, I wish I had one of X, and I don't. Usually the second or third time that I say that to myself, I'm like, all right, why haven't I bought one by now? So
Right.
you get into this progression in the hobby where the deeper you go, nature will kind of tell you what you need to get.
Yeah. Don't get carpal tunnel. Get a drill.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. Next on the list of level 2, I have a temp gun.
My favorite.
These can be found pretty much anywhere.
Yep.
We sell them Home Depot, Harbor Freight, any kind of, well, any store really. I've seen these things anywhere.
$15 to $25 ish.
Right. This one is a decent one with a little laser on there. I doubt you guys can see. Reads out the temperature. Motor temperature is very critical in these cars. If you're building a new build or if you're changing gearing or yada yada. Getting the motor temp, very, very helpful.
So here's one for you.
There we go.
I bought, it's a book from, I can't pronounce the guy's name, but he's in Europe. Book is called Invisible Speed. It's
Okay.
all about chassis tuning and vehicle dynamics, stuff like that. It's crazy engineering, nerdy stuff. But in his book, he said that's how he checks to see whether the camber of the car needs to be adjusted. And this is what they do in full-scale cars, is they use the temperature across the tire.
No, come on.
Dead serious. So if you see me temping my tires at some point at the track, that's what I'm trying to see whether that's actually a thing.
Did you notice a difference from the inside to the outside of the tire?
I haven't tried yet.
Oh, all right.
Like I said, I know on full-scale cars, it absolutely
To
is
be
the way they do
continued.
it.
Tyler measuring tire temperature.
But, yeah,
We'll do a solo video on that. Might be fun anyway.
I'll experiment.
Maybe there is a difference. There should in theory. But anyway,
Yeah,
temp
it's
gun,
useful tool.
very useful and fun to play with because it's got a laser on it. But that's beside the point.
Cats love it.
Moving on, kind of group these guys together a little bit is a body reamer, which we also make. Shameless RCMadness plug.
That's a nice body reamer. It's nicer than mine.
This one is a pretty nice one, fancy aluminum one, very sharp. It's got the dial or the gauge on the side. That's the diameter of the hole in millimeters. Most of them have that. Some do, some don't. There's different levels of quality on the reamers, just like the Allen wrenches. This one I think is about $25. But some, again, with the tool, the actual material of the reamer itself. This one's titanium nitride coated. Some will just be plain steel.
Yeah, which mine is, and it's worn out.
Right, they do wear out, believe it or not. Just cutting into bodies, they just get worn out over time. So definitely a wear item. This one I've had for a while and it's still pretty sharp. But that really gonna come down to how often you paint bodies. But super useful tool. Definitely beats using a drill bit to pop your holes in your body because the drill bit can really get away from you fast and tear up your body.
Exactly. It'll
Yeah, for
grab it and rip it. And
So if you're doing any kind of bodies that require holes, just pick up a reamer. You won't regret it. And then a lot of times, reamers are actually sold with these. They're Lexan scissors. These ones are curved, and they also sell straight ones. You can buy all these items together sometimes in a package deal, or all separately, depending. But the curved Lexan scissors, especially, are great to have. These are for cutting out like wheel wells or just trimming bodies and
Yeah.
weird
it's
circular.
it's the difference between having like jagged wheel wells
Right.
and having a nice, smooth flow. They're actually, I found them really handy too, even doing decals. If you're trying to follow a
sticker
contour,
sheets. Yep, for sure.
and stuff like that. I've worn out like 3 sets of those in the last few years.
Yep, and if you're a complete animal like me, I cut wire with them all day. But wears them out very fast. Can't say I recommend it. But that being said, they're like, I don't know, $8 to $10,
Yeah.
depending on the ones. But super useful to have. Not necessary, but super useful. Especially if you're planning on doing a body, just grab a reamer and a pair of scissors if you're doing your first body. You won't regret it.
Yeah, those are things you buy once and then you have them.
Yeah.
If you don't lose it, they
Right.
tend not to wear out that fast.
Yeah, and the only reason I'm wearing out these tools is literally because I'm using them almost every day.
Right.
If you are just doing the hobby, you should be able to have most of these things
Like a normal person.
yeah, you'll have most of these things forever, really, as long as you're not doing what you're not supposed to do with them. And then sort of related, an X-Acto knife, very useful. Trimming, I use the X-Acto knife mostly to trim the little trees and stuff when I'm building cars.
Oh.
Clipping the little nubs off, the little,
Yep.
little flashing pieces, I think they call them.
You can use them to strip wires too,
Yep.
if you're careful.
Well, any general cutting really is what they're used for. It's just a razor, but super helpful when needed. Definitely has its place, and it's kind of related to the scissors and the reamer section. Probably talk about the flush cuts in this category too.
So these are one of my favorite tools in my toolkit, especially, and not so much with the race cars, because I may get heat for this. You should not have zip ties on a race car.
You talking real race cars or RC racing?
On an RC car.
We do use them for RC racing though. I'll tell you why after I keep going.
Okay. I have a pet peeve about big hankin' ugly zip ties on, like,
I love zip ties.
on
This should be on this.
on race cars.
That should be a tool on this table.
If you,
also.
I will fight you.
Zip ties
No.
are amazing.
They are, but I think they have their place. Anyway, the point is that if you've ever used a zip tie, right, and you go and you grab a normal pair of pliers that has the cutter head on it, or you grab a pair of dikes or whatever, and you cut them, you have just created one of the sharpest cutting devices known to man, and it's that little tiny tail that's left behind because it's not a flush cut.
Terrible.
So flush cut pliers, as their name implies, are perfectly flat at the top where you're down cutting, so you don't end up with that little nub that can cut you and send you to the hospital. So flush cuts are awesome. I also will use these to strip wires. If you're just right with your tension, you can twirl the wire.
Yeah, definitely a little trial and error on
inside
that.
them.
But going back, we do use them on the race cars for cutting some of the nubs off the tires. Sometimes we need less traction on our tires.
Oh, you're saying these?
And we snip the little pins
Oh,
off.
duh. Yeah,
with flush cuts.
that's the reason why. That was one of the reasons why I bought them.
And you
Yep.
said we don't. You just went right to zip ties.
I meant you don't use zip ties on a race car.
I know. But
This you
we
should.
use flush cuts.
Yeah.
Cutting nubs off tires.
Yeah, that's a
definitely
good one.
Pretty awesome. But flush cuts just come in handy general. Again, for cutting the flashing and stuff off the trees, flush cuts work very well for that as well.
Yes.
Probably be even better than X-Acto because you're not really applying the
Less
pressure.
likely to shank yourself.
Correct. Yes, less likely to clip a finger. Flush cut's pretty awesome. Nice to have. What else we got here in this category? Shock pliers. Very nice. Shock pliers are pliers for shocks, essentially. So these ones actually got a couple of items on them. Most of them do. Some of them are just shock pliers, but this, mostly being the shock plier, is that they have these, round grooves cut in them. So when you clamp onto a shock shaft, it holds the shaft from spinning, so you can thread on the ends or tighten the piston down on the top without actually scratching the shaft. And like if you hold it with a regular pair of pliers, the teeth on the pliers will generally dig into the shaft, and if the shaft spins, it'll tear up the shaft. So when it goes into the shock, it'll actually cut up the O-ring.
That shock will leak for the rest of its life.
Right, not good. You can use pliers or like a piece of paper or something like that, but it's not the best, but it'll get you by.
Right. You're rolling the dice a little bit.
But if you're
Those are foolproof.
If you're going to be building cars or working on shocks or just general tweaking of a car, shock pliers are awesome. And that being said, this particular one is the Racer's Edge one, which is cool. A lot of companies make them. Losi has some, TLR, Techno one is written. I have the Techno one myself. It's actually got a popper here in the middle, which actually is used to pop ball cups off.
Which is also amazing, because that's
Right.
a pain in the butt to try to do.
You can pop the
without-
ball, like you stick the shock end in here and you can clip it and pop the ball right out.
Yep.
Which you can do with pliers, but you gotta like really twist it, and it can be a little bit annoying sometimes. I don't know what this one does here at the top as well. You have to use the middle section here? I'm not sure about that.
Have not explored that yet.
Yeah, so this one's got some holes here that I'm not really sure what to do with them, but like on my Techno one, it's got a 12 millimeter and a 17 millimeter hex in here, so you can hold wheel hexes and tighten down the screw on the inside.
Huh?
Like on an A scale, the hex is held in by a set screw with a pin, so you can hold it, tighten it down, loosen it up, which are usually Loctited in and very hard to get at.
Yeah, that was another tool that I did not. I bought that a few weeks ago.
Oh, really?
Because I borrowed Andrew's, because I had to pop some of the little balls out of the bottom of the shock, and
Right.
I used his, and it was just like, why do I not own one of these? So off I went.
Yeah, so I mean, awesome tool to have, and he's been liking it ever since. I use one all the time because I'm working on other people's cars, so I can't be scratching up their shock shafts when I'm redoing stuff. So I kind of have to have one.
They'll do it for themselves.
Yeah, usually they're bent like this, but that's beyond the point. Well, might as well throw the flashlight in this category too, and that too. Yeah.
I'm not going to turn this on because it's probably going to mess up the camera. But yeah, a cheapy flashlight can be really handy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you, my life, if I drop something under the bench here, it either disappears into the abyss or, so if you have a flashlight, you at least have half a chance of finding what you dropped. The other thing I find it useful for is if you think you cracked a part or something that you're trying to really
Right.
put direct light on to see whether, the crack casts a shadow or something. It's really good for that. And like if you're trying to see where your C block pills are, like what setting you have,
Yeah, just
where it's a hidden little part of the car that you can't get direct light on, that's a lifesaver because then you don't have to pull the car apart to find out that it.
just general situation where you can't see.
Yeah,
Flashlight.
super useful.
I always carry mine here. I got it on my belt. Carry it around with me all day. It's a lifesaver. You got to check. Sometimes the gears are hard to see. I use it to check gear mesh a lot in the cars, sitting on the floor or something like that,
Yep.
or looking inside the differential. Blah blah blah. But yeah, essentially any low light situation. Go figure. Need a flashlight.
Right.
Super awesome to have, and definitely can take a 5-minute job and cut it down because you can see what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
And then of course files.
Yep.
Another Harbor Freight kind of go-to thing. These are probably very cheap and will probably dull fast, but I grabbed these because I had taken apart the front of the car and one of the, suspension pins had a little bit of a burr on it. It didn't want to go back together once I had the thing pulled out. And sometimes all it takes is you just got to kiss it with a file and knock the edge off it and everything.
Again, yeah, level 2. Nice to have, not necessary, but definitely helps when needed. That's kind of the level 2.
Yep.
I think that qualifies most of level 2. So moving on to level 3, which is a little bit blurry between 2 and 3 here, I guess. But I did throw some measuring tools into level 3. And when I say level 3, it's not like you need to be level 3 to use these tools. It's more of a system of needed to not so much needed, but nice to have. Just
Yeah.
to clarify on that again.
Usually so like a level 1,
You need-
early in the hobby, you're going to have. Level 2, it's over time. Level 3, it's kind of the stuff where you've really gone down the rabbit hole and
Yeah.
you want to get to kind of doing some fine tuning and tinkering and stuff like that.
Yeah, so in that category, I have some basic measuring, I guess not really basic, but specific measuring tools for RC cars. I have a ride height gauge, and a camber gauge. These ones are about as basic as it gets for these tools. By that I mean these are just the plastic variants with the gauge on the side and the knob, and put it up against the wheel, and that measures the camber. And this one's got a lever here and goes up and down and measures the ride height underneath the chassis. These tools have their own category all in themselves. These are just the basic plastic ones. I think these are, maybe this one's like $10 now, it's about $10.
Yeah,
Right?
the ride height is low C, the camber gauge is RPM.
Yeah, they do the job, and they're great. They're honestly awesome. But like I said, you can buy full-on setup stations, which a lot of the guys have here, and they're awesome. They're all machined aluminum ball bearings, precise to 0.5 millimeter, but they are expensive. But if you're gonna be really deep into racing and you're like, man, I'm really into setting up this car, setup stations are awesome. Hoodie
Yep.
makes them, Aeromax makes them. They have gauges on the top to measure toe, which is kind of difficult to do otherwise.
As we'll get to.
Yeah.
I have a pretty ghetto way I do it, but it's good enough for. who
But
it's
so
for.
these are just basic measuring ones. They're pretty awesome, but you can go real deep on these tools too. You can spend a couple $100s on just measuring tools setup station wise.
So what goes with those
Tyler's got something else in his toolbox.
that I hope I can reach
Aha.
is this,
A setup board, or pit board, if you will.
which in my case is just a giant cutting board that I got off Amazon. But
Yeah.
it's super useful because I'm trying not to make noise, and I'm going to make noise anyway. Sorry. Okay, it's super useful because when you're making these adjustments, you know, the pit benches here are relatively flat, but you know, you want a nice flat surface when you're doing camber because that's the datum that you're pulling the measurement against. You know, so you don't want this at an angle because when you take your measurement, it's going to lie to you. The same with ride height. You want to be able to measure, you know, from the back of the car to the front of the car without this thing going up or down and changing the measurement as well. So the pit board is really helpful, and I think I paid $25 or $30 for that, and it's huge. It's big enough for an 8th scale car, or, you know, whatever.
Yeah, so Tyler's just using a cutting board for that, but they do make RC specific ones, I guess, or RC branded ones. I know Hoodie makes some really nice ones.
How do you low C much more?
Yeah, you can even get custom ones made with your logo, stickers, the whole show, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Tyler got the cutting board there. I use the glass on the top of the counter here because glass is always flat.
Yep.
But yeah, flat surface, and you can get some serious measuring tools for camber, toe, ride height, the whole show.
You know what? It just occurred to me. I didn't bring it. I could have, but it was cool. But corner balancing scales. I actually have a setup where it's a central display, and then there are these little tiny scales that go under each wheel, and it tells you your cross weights, side to side, front to front.
Yep. The Sky RC is making those.
I think that's what I have.
Yeah, it connects to your phone even. It's pretty. We sell them here. We have them here.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, they have some down there in the hobby shop.
They're very cool. They're tons of fun to play with. You know, you can check your vehicle weight. You can do all kinds of other things with it. Is it necessary? Arguably no, because most of the time when I put the car on it, it's basically just telling me like, yeah, it's fine, leave it alone. So, you know, it's another one of those like tinker toys.
Yeah, it's tools at this level. Tools become almost their own hobby.
Yeah.
You know, I really love tools because I'm always working on stuff. But there's tools that you honestly just get because you want to play with the tool.
Like a motor dyno.
Video coming soon. Stay tuned. But yeah, like the scales fall in that category. Measuring tools.
If you're racing, you should have these.
Yeah, but they're also fun to play with too.
Yeah.
You don't need them to race by any means. You really don't. But they're definitely nice and can make that little bit of a difference to get your car more dialed in.
Yeah, 100%.
But that being said, I just wanted to touch on my caliper here real quick. This could be a level 2 item. Calipers are awesome to have, especially when you're building kits. I use it a lot for measuring turnbuckles.
Like the distance
on the inside turnbuckles for the initial setup, just so everything matches initially. Awesome. Or measuring, you know, diameters of gears, shafts, blah blah blah. Super nice to have a caliper, and they're relatively cheap too. You can pick those up for, I don't know, probably $15 to $50 depending on the quality, and that's a digital one, which I recommend getting a digital one just because it's so much easier to read. But that's up to you. I don't know how to read very well. I'd say that's more of a level 2 item. Moving on with more level 3s, soldering iron. Awesome tool to have. Need to know how to use it.
Yeah. And that's almost a video in and of itself. How to solder, how to prepare a joint.
I think I do have a soldering video on my on the channel as well, so you can check that out.
Yeah.
Quick one. But soldering iron is awesome to have. Not a tool that you might use very often, depending on what you're doing with it. I get a lot of guys that are into building drag cars, speed runs, and this and that. They're constantly swapping out motors, and they're using their iron all the time.
Yep.
Me, of course, use it every single day.
For your average like buggy racer here on a Friday night, though,
yeah,
you're probably not taking that motor out more than once every couple of weeks or something.
Yeah, and you can generally find one around too. I mean, we have 2 down in the shop. But at home, if you're really going to be into building things and trying things, have one set up at home. I think they're less than $100.
Yeah, for a nice one.
For a good
adjustable temp. You want to make sure you have enough wattage.
Yeah, so that's another thing. Don't cheap out on one. If you're not going to get one, just don't buy a cheap one. If you're going to, either don't get one at all or get a good one.
Yeah. Honestly.
And I'm not just saying that. I see it all the time. They'll go buy, this is one place you don't want to go to Harbor Freight for. They go buy the $30 or $40 plug-in one from Harbor Freight. It does not get hot enough for the solder that we use. You're going to get frustrated using it and possibly mess up your $100 motor or whatever you're doing.
Yep.
Just get a good one or don't get one at all.
Yeah, agreed.
Honestly, sounds a little harsh, but just do it.
Well, and again, that's another thing that if you buy a quality one,
Correct.
you're not. I mean, this guy might, but you're not going to wear out a soldering iron. You know, you're going to use it periodically, or doing whatever.
I mean, it takes us you know, good 2-3 years to wear one out.
Yeah.
We change the tips on it probably every 4 or 5 months.
Right.
But keep in mind that that thing is running 6 days a week for like half the day.
Right.
And we do forget it on occasionally. I will admit, which is not good for anything.
Saves the heating bill, hurts the electric bill.
But if we can get 3 years out of something, that means you should be using that for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Soldering iron, great item to have. Don't cheap out, and just take your time to learn how to use it. And honestly, everybody will be coming to you for soldering because that already happens to me. So moving on from the soldering iron, I got Dremel.
One of
I
my
forgot to bring mine
favorites.
to the table.
Total lifesaver.
But I use my Dremel all the time with a cutoff wheel or the little, it's like a little router bit for metal.
Yep.
Mine is just Dremel's just the company. It's really a rotary tool. But Dremel is the biggest name in the brand. Mine is labeled Dremel. I have the battery operated one with the rechargeable battery. I can't remember the exact model, but I'll see if I can remember to put it down there. Awesome tool to have. Sometimes you got to cut some slots and some screws to get them out with a flathead, circling back. Ooh, flathead needed. Getting out some strip screws, that's a trick all on its own.
Yep.
Shaving down some plastic. If you're going to get into custom building stuff, need a Dremel. Forget about it.
Yeah, that's
If you're going to be putting
not
parts
optional.
in cars that were not made for said car, Dremel. Opening up holes, Dremel plastic, slots, this, that. I use it all the time. Lifesaver.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of other instances I've used it. I mean, if you're really crazy into like maintenance on your car, you can chuck a hinge pin and polish it with a little bit of mag polish. I mean,
That's the next level.
that's getting into some pretty but shock shafts, things like that. If you're really trying to finesse some of your parts, the Dremel can do that too. So that's another thing I've had in my toolkit for ages.
The majority of mine is usually with a cutoff wheel and cutting something,
Fair.
trying to get something apart. The Dremel, awesome to have. And following the Dremel in this category, I got heat gun. Heat gun is something I use a lot. Item you can get at Harbor Freight. Mine is from Harbor Freight.
So what are you using it for? Because all that comes to mind for me is shrink tubing, and I have a lighter.
All right, so heat gun, circling back to Loctite.
Oh.
If you're using too much, not even the person's use too much Loctite, but a lot of these cars from the factory get a little happy with the Loctite on the bottom chassis screws,
Really?
and you really got to cook them to get them out. Sometimes if a gear is stuck on the shaft of a motor, you can heat it up, pull it out. I get it to change bearings inside of motors sometimes, and I have to heat them up and then tap out the bearing.
So you would heat the housing, it expands, and then the bearing will...
Correct. Usually the motor is aluminum, and the bearing is some kind of steel, so the aluminum will expand, and you can tap out the outer race of a blown-up bearing. That goes for motors and hubs. I use that all the time. Shrink tube, that's a great one. If you're doing, that goes hand in hand with the soldering iron.
Yeah.
And just, I don't know, that's pretty much it. General heating of anything, really.
Yep.
Helps getting things apart, usually metal to metal items. But awesome to have, and they're relatively inexpensive. I think you can get ours was one of the better ones at Harbor Freight sold, and it was $45. But awesome tool to have. What else we got on here? I think that's I got Vice and Hammer on here too.
That's probably more for the kinds of stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, I threw that down. I do want to touch on Vice and Hammer. This is definitely more for the bashing community, and if you got a bench to bolt it down to, I love my little Vice and my Hammer, man. I had to talk about it. It's a champ. Sometimes you got some kind of pin or something in the car, and maybe that pin's on back order for 2-3 months.
So you can't just trash it.
We throw that pin on a Vice and hit it with a hammer, and she's straight again. Good enough to send it back out and get a little more mileage out of it. Or something's stuck and you just got to clamp it down and hammer it. I get pinions stuck on motors, and sometimes I got to hammer them off with a little bit of heat gun action. Boom, boom. But obviously, some next level stuff there. Not something that everybody's gonna be doing, but I love my little Bison hammer, so I had to talk about them.
Yeah, that's
And
a good one.
honestly, not very expensive either. I mean, I think the vise I got was like $40 or something. It's
Yeah,
a smaller
it's
one.
like
It's not very big, and
right.
then just a regular hammer, for like a wood hammer, just.
Yep.
You just mostly need a place to bolt it to, which is not ideal for some people. I have a wood bench in the back. That's an at-home item. Nobody brings their vise to the
Don't bring your
racetrack.
vise and clamp it to the benches.
Don't bolt your vise to our bench. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I got written down for tools. I don't know if you got anything else. Do a little recap on that.
I mean, the only one we didn't talk to was I have a little cheapy tape measure that I bring with me. I use it to set my toe.
I use it to measure.
I almost say it with a measure of shame because it's so barbaric. But basically, if you have your tires, you can measure between the fronts and between the back. You just got to make sure you're measuring 180 out. And that's how I've done it for a long time. I don't trust my eyes. If I look at the tires and I measure them, I'm going to see different things. So.
It don't hurt to have a tape measure either. And if you got to measure something that the caliper can't reach and you can be within a relative margin of error,
yeah,
you can't be the tape measure. Sometimes I got to measure out frames or something to drill a hole in or something, and it's a foot and a half long. You got to use a tape unless you got a caliper that's that long, which they do make, but I wouldn't recommend getting.
Yeah, you're not going to put that in your box. And again, I mean, for how much? That's what, $5 I think I paid for this.
Probably find one.
And you just throw it in your box.
Probably have one.
If you need it, you have it, and if you don't, then who cares? So.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is a lot of stuff. This is stuff that takes some people years to accumulate. But
quick. Yeah, honestly, yeah, I've been accumulating things for a long time.
Same.
But quick recap on tools. Allen wrenches, most popular and definitely the most necessary item. Spend the money up front. Get good quality tools. You won't regret it. Definitely want to pick up some kind of pliers and screwdrivers. Doesn't have to be anything too fancy, but definitely will save your bacon. And then just regular grease, Loctite, and super glue will get you by in a lot of situations.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're building things, definitely necessary. So that's kind of the necessary tools. And then category or level 2 we had talked about. You've been in it for a minute at this point. Pick yourself up a drill. Save your fingers. If you're going to be getting into painting and building cars, reamer, X-Acto knife, curved scissors, definitely going to want to pick that up if you're into building things. And then tuning a little bit, we got the heat temp gun, awesome tool to have, mixed with a flashlight, and I guess we threw some sharp pliers in there too.
Yeah.
Awesome tools to have. And then a little bit more of the advanced stuff, measuring tools, setup stations, camber gauges, rod height gauges, calipers, soldering irons, heat guns, all the fun stuff to have on your bench at home, definitely. Now, it may not be something that you always bring to the track, but if you're that deep into the hobby, awesome to have on your bench at home.
Yeah.
Depending on what you're building or fabricating or whatever you've got going on.
Yep.
So with that being said, and all the tools that we had talked about, which we sell the majority here at the store, or Harbor Freight, check them out. Awesome store. I'm sure you guys already know about. So we got a little bit of a part 2 of the show here. We're going to just go quickly. A little bit of maintenance on these cars and what we're going to use. What do we use the tools for? I just got a quick list I want to go over here. This pertains to general bashing and racing.
Yeah, I think a lot of this stuff, like preventative maintenance, is the difference between throwing the car in the truck, going for a drive, like you're gonna take it for a rip, and running a full pack, or running the first third of the pack, right. And then something fell off. I don't have all my tools with me, or whatever.
Yeah, just to tie some of the first few episodes of the podcast together. So you got your first car, you got yourself some tools. Now you got to kind of look at the thing after you're done driving and do a little preventative maintenance, as Tyler P. has said.
Yeah.
I just got a quick list of some things that I always check when a car comes in for a tune-up. First, I usually check out screws. Just any loose screws, just go over the whole car, especially if it's a brand new car or a brand new build. Even if it was factory built, especially if it was factory built.
Thank you.
Check out the screws. These cars do have a lot of moving parts. Things do vibrate, move, wiggle, and they will loosen up. Usually, just go over the car the first few times you run it, and generally the screws will kind of set in and you won't really have too much of a problem. Um, most of the time, I say most.
No, that's true, because through the first few packs you run, everything does its like initial flexing. So whatever's going to come loose, you might get a quarter turn out of a fastener or whatever, and once you kind of, it takes a set. You still want to keep an eye on stuff, but it's probably going to kind of like find where it wants to be.
Yeah, just check it out, and I mean, especially if you're bashing in racing, bashing mostly because you don't want things falling apart on you, and racing mostly because you don't want to either tear up the track or lose a race, one or the other.
Right.
But it's just an easy thing to do. Grab your quality set of Allen wrenches and just check all the screws on the bottom of the car, because they'll work their way out, and if the chassis hits the ground, it will bend or break the screw, and you got a whole nother situation on your hands.
Yeah, now it's a nightmare to fix it.
I see that happen a lot. I see ball studs back out a lot on these cars, and when they start backing out, they start getting really wiggly like this. One, the car starts handling funny, and two, eventually you'll get hit, it'll snap and break off inside of whatever it's screwed into, and hopefully it's not aluminum, because one, you gotta hope you can drill it out, or two, you're buying a new aluminum piece, which is generally not given away. So just check the screws. Super easy to do. Maybe you need to apply some Loctite or some glue or something. But yeah, easy to do, and just generally a good way to look at your car after you're done driving it.
Yeah.
Kind of following in with the screws, check for any leaking fluids. I always check that. Differentials, maybe something blew up and there's a bunch of fluid hanging outside of the drive cup. Shock seals blew out the bottom and the car's all pogoey, and you got to check that out. You got to break out your shock pliers, your nut drivers, take that shock apart, rebuild that, and that kind of stuff. But otherwise, check out after that, we got diffs. Check your diffs, make sure there's no grinding gears and stuff like that.
Yep.
That just is general maintenance coming out, and then clean the car up. Use your cleaning tools. You got your toothbrushes and picks and whatnot, and then after that, throw your battery in storage mode and call it a day.
Right. If you put it away in usable condition, you'll be able to, throw a fresh battery in it and go run it the next time.
Yeah, just generally look over your car, take care of it, and yeah, I think that's about it.
I think that'll do it.
That'll do it. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll be back next week with episode 4. Yeah, good show, Tyler. See you guys.
Later.